Greetings, my name's Robin Walker, I am the Black History Man. Okay, first of all, it's important that we accept that the human race is of African origin, because there are plenty of people who don't accept that. Okay, let me present the evidence and how the evidence has been built up. If we go back 2,000 years to the time of the ancient Greeks, there was an ancient Greek historian called Diodorus Siculus. He wrote an encyclopedia of world history called General History. And in book 3 of General History, written somewhere around 50 BC, something like that, Diodorus explains that the Ethiopians were the first of all men. Now, the term Ethiopian is an ancient Greek term, and it means literally the burnt-faced people. And that was an ancient term that has the same meaning as the term Negro, the term Sudan, the term black. So when he says the Ethiopians were the first of all men, he's referring to black people being the first people on the planet, and he then goes on to say, this is conceded by practically all men. Now, moving forward 1,800, 1,900 years to the time when we get to Charles Darwin. Charles Darwin, as everybody knows, is the father of the natural selection theory of evolution. Darwin wrote a book called The Descent of Man, and that book came out in 1871. And this was the first book to attempt to link the origins of humanity to evolutionary theory. And in that book, Darwin, page 199, states that Africa is where the human race came from. The oldest known skeleton is Kangera man, and that was dug up in Ethiopia at a site called Omo. And Kangera man is dated at 195,000 years old. That's older than anything found outside Africa. So the human race is of African origin. So the question then is, well, how comes, if we look at the people of the planet Earth, we're not all black? Well, the reason is some people have undergone evolution because in leaving Africa, people moved into climates that were non-tropical. Now, the theory of natural selection is this. If you're in an environment where your features suit that environment, you will tend to keep those sorts of features. Now, let me give you an example of that. The early black people that used to live in Europe, going back 40,000 years ago, Europe was in an ice age, so it was not an advantage to be black-skinned during an ice age. So those few people among these early Europeans who are albinos had an evolutionary advantage in being in that particular condition. Albinism exists in every population, and it's a statistical regularity. It's a very small thing, but it happens. Now, if you're in an ice age, that means there's reduced exposure to sunlight, so people are likely to cover themselves with animal skins. If there's reduced exposure to sunlight, the amount of sunlight that's available to touch the skin, to result in vitamin D, creating proper bone formation, all of this is reduced during an ice age. So if you're black-skinned, you will tend to have a short life expectancy where you're likely to end up dying from rickets. Rickets is soft bones. And there's examples of early skeletons that have been dug up in Europe where we can see the soft bones thing. Those people who are albinos, therefore having little or no melanin in the skin, the little exposure to sunlight would be enough to go through the skin, vitamin D, and then the result then is proper bone formation. So during an ice age, you'd end up with people who were black-skinned having a short life expectancy, producing a small number of children. The very, very few albinos among them would have had a normal life expectancy, producing more children. And over time, some mathematicians calculate 16,000 years. You would end up with albinos going from a tiny, tiny minority to a majority during that period. Okay, now black albinos, what color hair do they have? Well, some of it's blonde, some of it's ginger, some of it's brown. What type of skin colors do they have? Some cases it's very, very pale. Others it's darker with freckles. And then if we look at the hair colors, the eye colors, and the skin colors of black albinos, it covers everything that we see among European peoples. People will then say, Robin, well, what about the fact that Europeans have, generally speaking, narrow features, narrow noses, thin lips, and so on? Well, simple. There are black people in Africa with those very same features. You only look to some of the populations in East Africa and you'll see those features. Another position is, but Robin, what about the straightened hair? Now, question, are there black populations with straight or straightened hair? Well, yes, there is. A lot of the Australian Aborigines have got straight hair, and many of them are actually jet black. So the question then is, well, are Europeans descended from black albinos that became the majority beginning 40,000 years ago in Ice Age Europe up to, say, 20,000 years ago when the Caucasian race is thought to have evolved? The answer is yes. Although it's something that has been kept rather quiet, European DNA, it's called mitochondrial DNA. If you look at the range of African mitochondrial DNAs, it's the widest range on the planet. And the reason is because black people are the parents of everybody on the planet. If you look at the European range, it's quite narrow, and that fits well within the African range. So consequently, white people have black people's mitochondrial DNA. Okay, now in the case of Asians, I use the term Asian the way Americans use the term, to refer to Chinese, Japanese, Koreans, and for that matter, Native Americans. In other words, people with by and large broad types of faces, by and large flat types of faces, with the epicanthic folds over the eyes. Now, this race of people are the most recent if we're talking about evolution. Some scholars give dates like 15,000 years old. Some scholars give dates like 6,000 years old. And again, when we're dealing with what we can call the Mongolian type, they too are an evolutionary adaptation from black people. If you were to Google, type in the word Bushman. Now that term is a bit of an insult, but that's the term that anthropologists used to use to refer to black South Africans and black Namibians. And if you look at their faces, you'll notice that they look a little bit Chinese, or to be exact, the Chinese look like them. The most famous example, of course, is the former president of South Africa, Nelson Mandela, where you can see that he has a vaguely Chinese face, or to be exact, let's get it the right way round. The Chinese look like him and his people. Now, more recent races are the people of India. Your Mr. Patels and company, if you were to look at their history, they're actually a mixture of black, white, and yellow. And if you get a large group of what we in this country call Asians, people from India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka, you'll then see that some of them look more Negroid, some of them look more Caucasoid, some of them look more Mongoloid. And essentially, you're what we call Asian race. They're essentially a mixture of peoples that became mixed something like 3,500 years ago, and then subsequent admixtures have blurred the racial lines. And that's why Asians look the way they do. Some look more black, some look more Caucasian, some look more Mongolian.